opportunities for girls interested in becoming nuns who cannot pursue higher studies after class 12. The institute is built on the site of the first Shedra, established in 2001 for women, known as Pema Choling, founded by Gangte Tiku Rinpoche, which houses about 100 nuns. The Shedra, or an institute established in 2001, is the highest center of learning for nuns in Bhutan and is affiliated to the Gangte Rikshung Shedra in Phopjikha. Many of the nuns joined with little or no education, some of them as young as 11 years and the oldest being with 60 years. They study and meditate and receive a traditional curriculum that was not available to women. The nuns begin the day, wind up their daily chores by 6 p.m. to beginning evening studies with the help of the kerosene oil lamp. The students follow a curriculum that will enable them to graduate with a master's degree in Buddhist philosophy after 9 years. The curriculum includes Dharma studies, which include logic, history, and debate, and non-Dharma subjects such as English, Dzongkha, mathematics, science, geography, embroidery, stitching, and the making of a traditional craft to equip them with the skills to earn a living for themselves and to benefit their communities in the future. The newcomers start studying prayer books and writing. Several nuns who have primary education and secular schools help to teach with some of the subjects. Another nunnery called Shechen Organ Chorzang Nunnery, nestled in the mountains in the central place, which is called Sisana near the capital Thimphu, is one of the few places in Bhutan where women can study and practice the Dharma. Built by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche after his escape from Tibet, the nunneries offers women the rare opportunity to study and train in his lineage. There are currently over 70 nuns between 16 and 60 years old who live and study at the nunnery under the guidance of Shechen Ramjam Rinpoche. Rinpoche wants to provide the same quality of life and standard of education as the monk at Shechen Monastery. All expenses for their food, shelter, and clothing is covered by the nunnery. To accommodate the growing demand of accommodation, Shinchen Ramjam Rinpoche and Khandrul Hamu, the wife of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, expanded the nunnery's facilities in 1998. 2 graduates from the Shechen Shedra teach meditation, reading, and writing to the younger girls, while the older nuns follow a 5-year study course which equips them with the necessary training to eventually return to their communities to teach and create further opportunities for women. 11 of the nuns were the first group of nuns from the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism to receive the full Bhikshuni ordination in Hong Kong. It is hoped that with the introduction of such structured education program for nuns in Bhutan, Bhutanese women with vast potential will be able to stay in the country and be of service to the Bhutanese people. As such, Buddhist nuns educated in India are returning to teach Buddhism in nunneries and institutes founded by monks such as Gangte Tiku Rinpoche. It is heartening to note that the highest Rinpoche of the country are fully supportive of developing institutions for higher spiritual trainings for the nuns. Bhutan needs more educated nuns to reach out to women in the poorer and remote regions in the country. Most of the institutions are far from any village nestled in the high mountains. Life is very harsh for those nuns, as they often lack clean water, electricity, sanitation, and adequate nutrition. Educating the nuns will help to bridge the gender, poverty, and literacy gap by creating more social equality in Bhutan. Educated nuns can also play a vital role in teaching the Dharma to lay people, especially lay women, as many Buddhists in Bhutan still have a very poor understanding of Buddhism. The challenges faced by nuns in pursuing high education. This is my personal perspectives. Having discussed the positive changes and the benefit of a study program for nuns in Bhutan, I wish to add that nuns should also broaden their horizons by going out into the society. Example, pursuing tertiary education in institutions of higher learning outside of the monastic community. Though very challenging, going out into the society to study is very important in my point of view. We can learn a lot and at the same time prove that nuns and monks are part of the society and not isolated from it. This can also help to dispel many misconceptions about the ability of monks and nuns to pursue higher studies or function in a larger society. Being a woman and a nun, it is not easy to go out and study outside our own monastic community. Firstly, our community of monks and nuns does not accept the monks and nuns pursuing higher education outside of monasteries or nunneries. Thus, they do not grant us leave unless we go out of the nunnery forever. If one wishes to go out to study and pursue higher studies, then one should be strong-minded and think of the future too, as one cannot go back to the community where one was once studying. This means that we have to go and find our own place to live or work outside unless we change our nunnery. Secondly, we have to face a lot of problems and harassment, especially from within our own community of the Sangha or the laity, whereby they think that monks and nuns are supposed to study in their own monasteries and nunneries and not outside. The outsiders also think the same. I personally came across some people who asked me, "How come you're studying in a university? What are you studying in the university? The monks and nuns of your community do not go out to study other than in your own monasteries and nunneries." Thirdly, we face sexual harassment once we are out of the monastic community. For example, people try to take advantage of our position as a nun and expect us to do anything to help them, where they come with all sorts of problems. They know that we do not refuse to help people in need and thus ask for things which are not supposed to be asked. Some people do it unknowingly as entails and what types the nuns and monks follows. Some people do it knowingly and purposely to take advantage. There are some who come up to ask for help with different excuses, often with ulterior motives. For example, some say they want to learn Buddhism and meditation, but later they change the topic and try to take advantage of us. Fourthly, it is also really challenging to keep up with all our precepts and practices as we do in the community. This is because the timetable we follow outside is different than the one that we follow in the nunnery. Therefore, it is especially important for the nuns to have a firm and strong mind when they go out to study. Nonetheless, we also learn a lot by coming out in the society to study, which we would never learn in the monasteries. We practice to be more patient and mindful and learn to be more careful as we have to face many difficulties. If we are in the monastery, then it is like practicing our patience in the mountain by ourselves with no one to disturb and irritate, and once we come out in the society, it will be back to our original form that is full of anger, hatred, pride, and jealousy. We also get more exposed to the world than when we are in a monastery or nunnery. Going out into society is just as important as meditating in the cave, if not more, as we directly practice all that we have learned in the nunnery. To conclude, I would say that the positive changes are happening in terms of systematic Dharma education for nuns in Bhutan. Though these institutions are fairly recent, it is a step in the right direction, as once more women are educated, they would be able to bridge the gender gap and assist in a more significant way in teaching the Dharma to other nuns and lay people. Women, especially from poor and remote regions who cannot afford to travel to India, would have a chance to study Buddhism at a deeper level, not just reciting mantras and prayers. These changes will have a very significant impact on women and Buddhism in general in Bhutan. I also feel that once women are educated within the monastic community, they should be given the opportunity to pursue higher education outside of the monastic community to broaden their horizons, if they wish to. Bhutanese nuns should be encouraged to study in universities and learn to relate to other people from different cultures, traditions, and ideology. This would equip Bhutanese nuns with confidence and the necessary communication skills to spread the Dharma, not only within Bhutan, but also to wherever Dharma teaching is most needed in any part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased to be here. From my perspective, it's time for us, as North American women Buddhists, to acknowledge more fully our debt to our Asian female forebears throughout the centuries and now, and to make common cause with our contemporary Asian Dharma sisters in the effort to achieve gender equity in Buddhism worldwide. As we're doing here in this conference, we need to cross national and sectarian boundaries to unite as women and begin to broaden our perspective as part of a multi-ethnic global project within Buddhism. First, I'd like to give a brief appraisal of what feminist work in Buddhism has accomplished in the United States. The activism and scholarship of feminists has transformed the intellectual landscape for American Buddhist women, with significant impact on the field of practice and study and on Buddhist institutions. Back in 1981, 27 years ago, I attended the very first Women in Buddhism conference in the United States. It was held at the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado, and perhaps 50 women attended. This gathering became quite explosive as women from Zen centers in California and Hawaii spoke up about the sexual power abuse perpetrated by their male teachers. Women were unwilling to endure and condone this abuse any longer, and we made common cause to do what we could to stop it. Between 1981 and 1990, there were 7 such conferences in various locations attended by women from all over the country. The participants, who came from Zen, Theravada, and Tibetan Buddhist sanghas, or communities, represented 2 groups. There were the women who had been involved in spiritual practice for the preceding 5 years or more within their Buddhist centers. And then there were the women who had been out in the streets, organizing and demonstrating for women's liberation. The feminist women had begun questioning the hierarchy and power dynamics in the Buddhist institutions they were beginning to frequent. Many of the longtime Buddhist practitioners, on the other hand, were concerned to preserve the tradition. So the energies for change and the energies for continuity met in these conferences and were debated, explored, acted out. The women in the sanghas where sexual abuse was taking place came to the conferences to express their hurt and anger, to learn ways to demand transparency and accountability from the members of their spiritual practice centers. The sleeping women woke up and began to make changes. Scholarship was taking place and books were written. Most of the early Buddhist environments in the United States were based on male monastic hierarchical models, not particularly welcoming to women, and certainly not to women with any kind of family responsibilities. Feminists have challenged the traditional hierarchical structures in many Buddhist environments and have taken steps to change them into more horizontal and egalitarian arrangements. For instance, they have sought to create a balance between practice and child raising for women, as well as to allow for collaborative decision-making and shared authority. Some Buddhist women have rewritten traditional male-only Buddhist language, and they have reshaped Buddhist liturgy to honor female as well as male forebears and acknowledge female participation, as obviously has been done in other countries. More and more women in the United States have been recognized as lineage-holding Dharma teachers, and they have assumed leadership roles, and some of them have established their own centers. Women have become centrally involved in the burgeoning activism of engaged Buddhism. The Buddhist Peace Fellowship is directed by an African-American Zen Buddhist woman, Zenju Erflin Manuel, who is sitting among us here. And also female Buddhist environmentalists and peace activists have made significant contributions. Many of the most dynamic programs of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, such as the Prison Program and Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement, were developed by women. Issues of inclusion having to do with race, ethnicity, and sexual preference are being addressed in many Buddhist centers, and this investigation is often spearheaded by women. There is a lesbian Buddhist Sangha in Berkeley that has explored the Buddhist path for 10 years now from a lesbian perspective. Nevertheless, we can probably count on the fingers of one hand the American men among our Dharma brothers who have read even one book by a feminist author. With the exception of Pema Chodron, who has become something of a rock star in the Buddhist world, and a few other prominent women teachers, the public face of Buddhism is still often male. Jack Kornfield, the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, various handsome, fresh-faced Tibetan monks. These are the folks who most often appear on the covers of our Buddhist magazines, as well as in general publications like Time and Newsweek to represent Buddhism. I am troubled by the plight of non-ordained women in my own Theravada tradition and in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. The fact that women are denied full ordination is a moral outrage that causes material and psychological damage to many thousands of women, most particularly in Asia. Yet, the status of these women is not widely known or understood by people who pursue a Buddhist practice in the United States. However, the conditions for women in general in Buddhist developing countries, which are rife with prostitution, sex trafficking, child sexual slavery, domestic violence, and AIDS, which have been talked about here, is only recently becoming a subject of interest to the majority of American Buddhist women or men. There is much more that needs to be done to inform my sister and fellow Buddhists in the United States about these issues. The habit of venerating men and dismissing women still operates in our communities, where often it is women who do the work of the center, yet it is the male teacher that people come to hear. In academia, if a student wants to study Buddhism from a Buddhist feminist perspective, she will not find a coherent program at any American university. But if she proposes research in women in Buddhism at the graduate level, the faculty will support her and her work will be respected by her colleagues. This represents an enormous change from 30 years ago. Because Buddhism is so new in our country, it makes sense that we North Americans would have spent the first 50 years learning about this spiritual path, getting grounded in our practice, and establishing institutions and communities. Then, in our case as women, we had to focus on our own empowerment and challenge the male supremacy that we encountered, both the male chauvinism imported from Asia and the homegrown sexism in our American culture. But now it's time to open out from that narrow focus and become responsible world citizens who engage in public witness and social action. To do this work, we need to recognize the extent of our privilege. We inhabit the most affluent country in the world, with advantages in healthcare and education that are not shared by most of the world's population. Most of us began as Christians or Jews and converted to Buddhism, so we don't have the long familiarity with our tradition that indigenous Buddhists have. The majority of us are heterosexual and benefit from that privilege. So I'm going to skip quite a lot here. When I look back over the past 30 years in American Buddhism, I see enormous changes. In 1980, I found one book exploring women's treatment in Buddhist texts and institutions. Now there are several shelves of books to read and learn from. In 1980, only one female teacher had led an all-women's retreat. Now, each year in the United States, there are retreats led by women, for women only, and large conferences and gatherings designed to celebrate our achievements and honor particularly deserving women. The women who were outraged by their teacher's sexual power abuse back in the early 1980s set to work to make changes in their Zen centers. They demanded that the teacher be made accountable to his students and that his sexual inappropriateness be brought into the open. Inspired by this, some male teachers and students joined with the women, and they created a code of ethics that could be accepted by any Zen center. This code was put into practice in Vipassana centers as well, so that relations between teachers and students in a number of areas are spelled out. These strong guidelines have proven useful in identifying instances of inappropriate behavior and offering a framework within which to bring the situation back into balance. As I said, more and more we American women Buddhists are looking outward to our Asian sisters and to minority groups in our own culture. We hope to unite and build, acknowledging our differences, ethnic, cultural, racial, class, and sexual preference, accepting and learning from these differences while we make the commitment to work for social change and spiritual liberation. Our challenge now is different and more complex than the one we faced 30 years ago. It's not just crucial to the health and growth of Buddhism in America, but to its transformation in other parts of the world as well. As an older Caucasian Buddhist feminist, I welcome the voices of younger women scholars, activists, and spiritual teachers from all Buddhist cultures and countries, and I'm excited to participate with you in building the future. Because of the work that has been done in the preceding decades, together we have rich resources to build upon. Thank you.
So much to all of our wonderful speakers. This has been an amazing morning with so many different perspectives, a real call for action to all of us, not only to work in society, but to work within our own traditions for positive social change, especially for women. Right now we will have our lunch break, and the lunch box for Mongolian people will be served in this hall. Sorry, there's no space for tables. Please stay in this hall to eat your lunch. The lunch boxes will be available here in a few minutes. Outside, the international guests will pick up their food and eat at the tables outside. I request your kind cooperation with this. Please go to your proper locations. Be careful of the floor. There has been some raindrops, so please make sure not to slip and fall. Okay, so this afternoon we'll have our panel as listed in the conference program, and then we'll have our workshop after the panel. Thank you very much. The afternoon session begins at 1, as usual.
Зохицох хэрэгтэй байна. Манай хоёр оюутны араас тэгээд игний болох хүмүүс маань хоолны талуун буюу тасалбартай байх хэрэгтэй. Харин хоолны тасалбаргүй өнөөдөр
Akaini Iwamoto.
There are some Mahayana sutras that say a woman must become a man before she can become a Buddha. Is it not possible for female practitioners who are engaged in meditation practice to gain the highest stage, the Buddha stage, in the Bodhisattva path shown in the Mahayana treatises? The Mahayana treatises, philosophical or systematical text, has different value from Mahayana Sutra itself. In the Mahayana meditation practice system, female practitioners also required to turn into a male prior to becoming a Buddha. I will answer these questions based on the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, one of the most important texts of the early Yogacara school of Mahayana Buddhism in India, which was composed around the 4th century CE. The early Mahayana sutras, such as the Prajna Paramita Sutra, came into existence already in the 1st century. However, the Mahayana began flourishing in India only from the 5th century onwards. Therefore, through the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, after this I call this text Alankara, So through the Alankara, we can learn the newly flourishing Mahayana's fresh view on the truth. In fact, the Alankara is the first treatise to have made a detailed argument against the conservative Buddhist who denies the authenticity of Mahayana as a Buddha's teaching. On the basis of a vast range of Mahayana thought, the Alankara established an innovative system of yogic practice, which had great influence on later Mahayana Buddhism. The final goal of this system is to become a Buddha. Let me first explain briefly the system of practice and thought expounded in the Alankara. Its basic framework of practice consists of the preparatory stage, the 10 stages, and the Buddha stage. The first stage of the 10 stages is also called the path of realization, Darshana Marga, which is traditional framework of practice. The Buddha stage without abandoning her female gender. Below, we shall explore this question by referring to the system of practice expounded in both the Abhidharma Kosha, after this Kosha, which is one of the most important conservative texts, and the Bodhisattva Bhumi and earlier Mahayana treatises. By the period of sectarian or Nikaya Buddhism, the Buddha Shakyamuni had become treated as an exception with regard to the capacity of becoming a Buddha. And the Buddha's disciples were thought to be unable to attain Buddhahood throughout their practice. According to the path of practice explained in the Kosha, the highest state that can be reached by the disciples is the state of Arhat, not the state of Buddha. The Kosha describes a number of meditations. The meditation to be accomplished immediately before the state of Arhat is called the diamond-like samadhi, Vajra Samadhi. Interestingly, this meditation is also expounded in the Alankara. The 14th chapter of the Alankara deals with the career of a bodhisattva who, aspiring to Buddhahood, first enters the preparatory stage and then finally attains the Buddha stage. Here, the diamond-like meditation appears in the 10th stage of the bodhisattva path. After accomplishing the diamond-like meditation, the bodhisattva obtains the ultimate transformation of basis and the highest state of omniscience. That is, the bodhisattva becomes a Buddha. Though with different goals, the Kosha and the Alankara share a very similar structure of practice. And in these two texts, no passage claims that women cannot attain either Arhathood or Buddhahood. On the other hand, it is well known that some Mahayana sutras claim that it is necessary for women to turn herself into a male before attaining Buddhahood. Interestingly, a passage pertaining to this idea appears in the Bodhisattva Bhumi. Quote, women will not realize the enlightenment. Why? This is because a bodhisattva abundance reverses as a female gender after passing the first innumerable period. The bodhisattva will never become female again. All women by nature have many passions and feeble wisdom. Unquote. This passage reveals that women were despised in India at the time of Bodhisattva Bhumi's composition, and that it was thought that the Bodhisattva would not become a Buddha in a female body, and that after a series of innumerable reverses, during the first innumerable period, there would remain no possibility for the Bodhisattva to be reborn as a woman. Here, one innumerable period refers to the 56th power of 10. According to the established theory, a Bodhisattva must pass through a period of 3 innumerable before attaining Buddhahood. The first innumerable period in the Bodhisattva's career ends just before attainment of the first stage. Therefore, Bodhisattva who enter the first stage are all male, no female. A similar passage is also found in the kosher. This passage says that a female gender will not manifest itself again for the practitioner who enters the path of realization. So, according to the path of the kosher, there can be no arhat in a female body. The kosher and the Bodhisattva Bhumi seems to share the tradition that there can be no female practitioner above the first stage or the path of realization. Now, we may ask ourselves whether this shared traditional position was also adopted by the Alankara. According to path of the Alankara, can there be no bodhisattva who attain Buddhahood in the female body? I would like to conclude this paper with an examination of this question. It is well known that the Alankara and Bodhisattva Bhumi share a common textual structure. This is due to the fact that the Alankara borrowed the framework of the Bodhisattva Bhumi. However, compared to the Bodhisattva Bhumi, the doctrinal contents of the Alankara is much more Mahayanic. Structurally, the chapter of the Bodhisattva Bhumi, where the above quoted passage appears, corresponds to the 9th chapter of the Alankara. However, the passage pertaining to the female body does not appear either in the 9th chapter or in other chapters of the Alankara. One possible explanation of this difference may be that, according to the Bodhisattva path of the Alankara, a Bodhisattva can attain Buddhahood in a female body. In the Bodhisattva Bhumi, the notion of Buddhahood to be obtained by a Bodhisattva is still closely bound up with a historical Shakyamuni. The Bodhisattva Bhumi explains in detail the 32 major and 80 minor physical characteristics of the Buddha Shakyamuni, and describes how these characteristics gain purity as the practice advances. Among these physical characteristics is one related to the male sexual organ, the male genitals. The presence of these latter characteristics seems to be one of the factors that would exclude the possibility of attainment of Buddhahood by female practitioners. On the other hand, in the Alankara, it appears that those physical characteristics of the Buddha Shakyamuni have lost special significance. So explanation of this characteristic is very small in the Alankara. So because the Alankara introduces particular theory of threefold Buddha body. I have demonstrated in the previous article that the bodhisattva path of the Alankara consists of a process of accomplishing the Dharma body, Dharmakaya, among the three bodies. The Dharma body is attained by a bodhisattva in the preparatory stage and becomes completely pure in the Buddha stage. By assigning the central role in the bodhisattva path to the Dharma body, which is totally different from a physical body, the Alankara could forego the consideration of Buddha's physical characteristics for the process towards the Buddhahood. This means that the bodhisattva can now attain Buddhahood in the female body. The authors of the Alankara, who realized the Mahayanist truth of emptiness, were able to overcome the social prejudice that prevailed in India and the dogma formulated during the period of sectarian Buddhism. They could thus establish a new bodhisattva path that is free from gender segregation. Thank you.
The Yoga Association of Alberta and the Canadian Iyengar Yoga Association. She has studied and practiced extensively in the Theravadan forest meditation tradition and is a graduate of the community of Abiding
Retreat is a type of skills training that I can take into everyday situation, into my life. Through this practice, I develop a greater strength and equanimity of mind. The main technique in mindfulness meditation is to become extraordinary attentive to very everyday ordinary experiences. Unfortunately, the word mindfulness can be a bit misleading if you interpret it to mean that you are constantly thinking about what you're doing. Mindfulness, in the proper sense of the word, simply means to be attentive and conscious about what's happening. Mindfulness meditation is something I have embraced, practiced, and studied for many years. It is about learning to open to what actually is the truth of nature. It's a training which encompasses all bodily and mentally processes in all situations in everyday life. A quote from the Dhammapada: "They awaken, always wide awake, Gautama's disciples, whose mindfulness, both day and night, is constantly immersed in the body." I began my spiritual journey as a young child, and I can remember being very young, lying in bed. I was probably 8 or 10 years old, and what was going through my mind was, I have been born, and I'm going to die, so what's the purpose? And that question stayed with me for a long, long time. The various breathing exercises, relaxation methods, and meditation were part of the practice, but I soon discovered that meditation can mean all kinds of things. It's difficult to define meditation in a way that accounts for a wide variety within the many spiritual traditions. Undoubtedly, specific techniques have evolved within each tradition and to address specific human personalities. And in the Western part of the world, much of what people call meditation I think may be better described as progressive relaxation, visualization, breath awareness exercises, concentration, sometimes even just spacing out. As I began my yoga journey, I actually thought there was something to get or achieve, and that with diligent practice I would root out the pain and the suffering, arriving at perfection. Not that I knew what that was. Then with the introduction to, and after many years of a dedicated Vipassana practice, I learned to open into an intimate connection with the heart, the body, and the mind. This brought for me both peace and stillness, and a harmony with life that I had not experienced before. I used the basic Hatha Yoga postures to illuminate the Buddhist teachings on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta. So today my yoga practice is very different, as I embrace imperfection and have compassion and understanding for the way things are. My body has and is changing. It's wearing out, it's breaking down, it's growing softer and looser, weaker. And I'm less concerned now about fixing things or getting stronger or even more flexible. I'm focused on learning to be present with the way things are. Perfection is merely an image created by thought. By being aware of what is happening in this body, I'm able to directly experience dukkha or sukha. The body is an ideal object of meditation, whether accessed as breath, touch, or sensation. By using mindfulness, I am able to maintain interest during both the healthy and pleasant times, as well as times of sickness and illness. And to balance and support my mindfulness meditation, I also practice regularly loving kindness, metta meditation, which brings a wonderful quality of heart to my life. All of the Buddhist teachings, according to the Theravadan tradition, are contained within the 4 Noble Truths concerning suffering and the release from suffering. The Buddha taught the middle path, one of awareness and understanding. In many of the suttas, the Buddha gives clear instruction on how to develop moral behavior, or sila, to concentrate the mind, samadhi, and to see clearly with insight wisdom, panya. Meditation is aimed both at calming the mind and attaining to clear knowledge and the true insight. And then there will be moments of embracing the here and now. Through mindfulness, we are aware not only of what we are doing and what's happening around us, but also on the feelings, the emotions, the thoughts that are rising. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha encourages the cultivation and maintenance of mindfulness so that we may become free of stress or dukkha. He is pointing us in such a way that we can see the mind and the body process for ourselves in our own unfolding experience. Mindfulness meditation is a way to pay more attention to the awareness of what is happening. It is by using skillful means that you can become aware of thinking rather than getting caught up in it. It's a way of developing some balance and unease in the uncertainty, the changing nature, the impermanence of mind and body. It is through developing awareness and not non-clinging that we can let this constantly changing nature be as it is. Once we understand and accept the truth of impermanence, the power of that acceptance is supportive, and you can then develop a wise relationship with living fully in the present moment. This path of meditation is a gift both to ourselves and to the world around us. I can recall the late Ayya Khema saying to me, "Spiritual path is all about letting go. There's nothing to achieve or gain." And these are very wise words from a wonderful teacher of mine. Mindfulness meditation is a core practice of the Buddhist teaching. It can not only be practiced every moment, but also becomes a part of who we are. Mindfulness goes beyond simple recognition of what is happening. It goes beyond keeping the mind steady. In this context is defined as a deepening in awareness, which brings clarity in awareness, continuity in awareness, richness in awareness, and precision in awareness. Meditation is the greatest gift I give myself every day. The quality of awareness, being able to see and know clearly, has its own nature. I can be aware of the fragile body and still have the freedom of mind. What I've realized is that conditioning has strongly brought me to a place of identity with and the clinging to emotions, thoughts, and physical sensations. Mindfully observing these habits shows me what to do, what changes are really beneficial to my growth, and how to develop my own inner strength. I will just finish with a simile from a quote by Ajahn Chah in a book called Simple Terms. And it reminds me of a yoga pose called Vrikshasana, the tree pose. We're like a tree with roots, a base and a trunk. Every leaf, every branch depends on the roots to absorb nutrients from the soil and send them up to nourish the tree. Our body, plus our words and deeds, our senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, feeling, are like the branches, leaves, and trunk. The mind is like the roots, absorbing nutrients and sending them up to the leaves and the branches, so that they may flower and bear fruit. So I'd just like to end by expressing my gratitude to all of you here.
addresses the exemplary endeavors of Daeng S님 to modernize Buddhist practice in Korea. In this paper, I will first examine Daeng S님's teaching on the importance of practice in daily life and will discuss specific changes she introduced to urban Buddhism. Daeng S님 spent more than 10 years deep in the mountains as an itinerant Sun Zen practitioner. At the conclusion of her mountain practice in 1972, she founded Hammam Sunan in Anyang, a satellite city of a metropolis of Seoul. Daeng S님's selection of urban locale as the main site for her Dharma teaching was significant. Although her own practice followed Korea's long tradition of mountain Buddhism, she realized at the awakening that one does not have to seek a special place for meditation. To her disciples, therefore, she does not insist on the kind of ascetic practice she undertook in wilderness. On the contrary, she stresses that one can, and in a sense, should practice where one's day-to-day life unfolded. She said the Buddha Dharma is the law of reality and the law of daily life. Therefore, as long as you think that enlightenment is something apart from your daily life, you will never realize enlightenment. The city dwellers in particular, Daeng S님 teaches that the here and the now are right time and the place for practice. She encourages us to accept the problems we face in parenting urban life as a material for cultivating our mind. It is not wise to avoid, reject, and be depressed by such hardships. Instead, we should embrace them as an opportunity to learn and grow, knowing that they are inherently empty. Daeng S님's emphasis on sun as an everyday activity explains her open attitude toward social change, and this is clearly reflected on her innovative ideas on the mainstream Korean practice tradition. Although this tradition shows the historical condition of the pre-modern society it was established in, it has become outdated in contemporary socio-cultural context. While we should honor the spiritual legacy of the tradition, we should simultaneously try to adapt it to the new circumstances in order to propagate the Dharma effectively in ultra-modern society. Daeng S님 proposes simplistic accessibility and concentration in practice programs
temporary structure, and the ritual poems. One of the most salient innovations which she implemented in Hammam Sunan in the use of vernacular Korean as a ritual language by translating old-fashioned Chinese terms into modern Korean expressions. She helped many lay Buddhists understand the Dharma easily. In Korea, traditional Buddhist chanting is based on the transcription of classical Chinese. However, this transcription method represents sounds, not meaning. As a result, lay Buddhists tend to recite the sutra without grasping its precise meanings. It was a deplorable situation that led Deng Snim to adopt vernacular Korean as a formal ritual medium. Her decision was not only brave but also democratic, given that its primary beneficiaries were educated women who constituted the majority of laity. Another distinctive feature of Hammam Sunan is the simple interior of its main hall. In a typical Korean temple, the main Dharma hall is dedicated to Shakyamuni, whose statue is supported by those two attendant bodhisattvas, namely Manjusri and Samantabhadra. Along with the three figures on the central platform, paintings of protective deities are also hung on. Him maintains that as far as ritual offering embody one's sincerity and respect, a new symbolic item would suffice. One of the popular customs for Korean Buddhists is releasing live fish or turtles into river or lake. This custom purports to reinforce the importance of compassion for all forms of sentient beings to a degree. However, such a purpose is lost of urban residents whose routine is alienated from nature. They liberate animals with noble intention, but without the proper knowledge of the local ecosystem. Deng Snim warns that, busy as we are, we should be careful not to perform a ritual act for the sake of a ritual. In Niue or fish and turtles, she recommends a true object of release, the sick and the poor among our neighbors. This is a way of drawing attention to those who have socio-economical marginalized the nation's relentless modernization process. Lastly, Hammam Sunan does not offer fixed-term prayer session. In many temples, nuns and monks pray for 100 or 1,000 days at the request of a lay person. Deng Snim de-emphasizes this program, commenting that Buddhists must earn good merit by praying themselves, not by delegating their practice to monastic members. She encourages ongoing prayer in day-to-day life. Deng Snim's pioneering project offers one example of how Buddhist institution can reform itself to cope with the issue of spirituality in the vortex of modernization. Deng Snim's vision is demonstrated by the vitality of the youth organization at the Hammam Sunan. The growing number of children, young adults, and college students who participated in ongoing practice program at the Hammam Sunan send a valuable lesson for those who engage in similar efforts to innovate their own local practice traditions. Thank you.
So, good afternoon to everybody, to our Venerable Sisters and all our other Dharma brothers and sisters out there. So this talk is quite short and it's very simple, so you can all relax. Okay, I'm not used to giving a talk by just reading what I've already thought of, so it's going to be a bit stilted, but I'm sorry. Okay. As we all know, the three jewels of Buddhism are the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So, although the Sangha jewel actually, strictly speaking, means the Arya Sangha, the noble Sangha, that is, all those ordained or lay who have realized stages on the path to liberation, nonetheless, to the average Buddhist, the Sangha jewel signifies the monastic Sangha of ordained monks and nuns. So traditionally, a large part of a layperson's role in Asia has been to support the monastic Sangha by the donation of food, clothing, medicines, and other requisites. They support the Sangha because the monks and nuns exemplify the Dharma life well lived, contentment with little, renunciation of worldly distractions and comforts, a life devoted to learning and practicing the Dharma, and so on. The Sangha, on their side, has a number of roles. Through the study of the Dharma, they become the repositories of Buddhist philosophy and culture. Through the practice of meditation, they become the living examples of spiritual experience and realization. And they serve society in the various needs through the performance of rituals. Thus, Buddhism is continually revitalized down the ages, and it has not just become mere dead dogma. In traditional societies, Buddhist societies in Asia, the Sangha were usually at the center of social activity. Since Sangha members were often more educated than the lay people around them, especially in rural districts, they served the people in the role of teachers, herbal doctors, counselors, and ritual experts for the times such as birth, sickness, and death. However, nowadays, the lay population is mostly no longer uneducated and credulous. Modern Buddhists go to school and college, become professionals such as doctors and psychologists, and essentially render many of the traditional roles of the monastics as redundant. Meanwhile, in monastic schools, the monks and nuns are receiving an education set down 1,000 or more years ago. They are still studying and debating philosophies that no one has believed in for centuries. Modern ideas and ideology are not admitted. So the graduates of these monastic institutions are trained as heirs to the fossilized and outworn belief systems, often with little or no relevance to present-day life situations. So understandably, the modern lay professional thinks, what use are these monks except for performing death ceremonies? The monastic Sangha has thus become marginalized from people's lives, except as an object of occasional merit-making. They are no longer at the heart of society, and so often their influence is negligible. In countries where the monks rely almost wholly on the laity for support, nowadays this often comes more often from the lower classes than from the affluent, educated segments of society. It seems to me that in the near future, the role of the monastic Sangha will become increasingly sidelined and increasingly unsupported, unless the Sangha itself takes a clear look at the situation and reevaluates its own contribution to society. The question is, why does Buddhism need a monastic Sangha in a world where educated lay people can study Dharma texts by themselves and also having attended numerous meditation retreats, are qualified to teach and guide others in both the theory and the practice of the Dharma. This shift has already occurred in the Western Buddhist world, where monastics are few and far between. In traditional societies of Asia, this trend is increasing, although usually not acknowledged. So, what is unique and special about the monastic Sangha that makes it still relevant and needed in our modern consumer society? Why are monks and nuns worthy of respect and offerings when they may actually know less about the Dharma than their own lay supporters? Modern consumer society is based on greed and acquisition. The more we have, the happier we will be. Advertising is designed to make us consider essential that which is usually totally irrelevant. So we buy, and yet seem to need more and more in an ever-increasing spiral. And our present secular society is also sex-mad. Increasingly erotic titillation screams at us from billboards and magazines. Movies and television become ever more explicit, and mainstream entertainment is increasingly pornographic. So our sense of morality is turned on its head, and selfishness, indulgence, and promiscuity are the norms. We worship and strive to emulate the neurotic and ego-based celebrities of screen and sport. But the Buddha said, greed is like salty water, and the more we drink, the thirstier we become. So maybe the antidote to greed is not trying to satisfy all our endless desires, but cultivating the joy of giving and contentment with little. Now, the monastic Sangha should be the role model and inspiration for a way of life not based on acquisition, but on simplicity and renunciation. They show the joy of having few belongings and living in this world lightly, not burdened by the heavy weight of possessions and the endless desire for ever more possessions. The monastic Sangha, celibate and free from family ties, should encourage people to live a life of modest self-restraint and discipline as a way to inner happiness and satisfaction. They should so live as to be a light of sanity in the midst of the heavy darkness of our materialistic madness. They could also consider extending their role not only in study, meditation, and ritual, but also to include service. Taking the Dharma out to those in need, for example, in hospitals and prisons, inspiring and guiding various social projects, etc. Of course, there are already monks and nuns, as we have heard, engaged in such projects, but there is a need for further involvement amid public approval. We have examples in Taiwan, in Korea, Thailand, Nepal, to name a few Buddhist countries where some members of the Sangha are now actively involved in various public-spirited undertakings to benefit society. And above all, the Sangha exists to preserve and spread the Dharma. Since most Sangha members do not have an outside job or familial responsibilities, they have ample time to study and practice and then teach those who wish for guidance on the path of Dharma. Unfortunately, in recent times there have also been many scandals involving monks accused of sexual and financial misdemeanors. Some monks live more luxuriously than their supporters. This has also caused the lay people to question the role of the Sangha and has undermined the faith of many. In such situations,